Hey guys and girls and horror fans, welcome back to Board Now's channel and to our October reviews. We are continuing on this spooky season with one of my favorite horror movies, technically a mini-series. I call it a movie because I saw it all in one go, and that is Stephen King's Rose Red. So to just give a little bit of background, this movie came about after a failed attempt to make a adaptation of The Haunting of Hill House with Steven Spielberg and Stephen King. After that project kind of fell apart, Stephen King took the original script and reworked it into a miniseries called Rose Red. So essentially, Rose Red is very loosely based on the Winchester Mystery House, which, if anyone knows, is a house, very infamous house in America that is said to be haunted. Mary Winchester went a little bit crazy in that house. So Rose Red tells the story of a psychic professor. Well, she's a professor of psychic phenomenon. She's not psychic, but she teaches psychic phenomenon and ghost hunting and everything. And she is obsessed with this old Seattle mansion called Rose Red, which has a very violent history of eating people and killing people as they go through the house. It was built at the turn of the century by an oil tycoon. And basically, we see this professor take a bunch of gifted people into Rose Red to try and kind of wake it up and get proof that the supernatural and that psychic phenomenon exists. Now, if anyone's thinking this is a dumb idea, it really is. This really is like using a light, like someone says in the movie, it's like you using a lighter to see if your gas tank is full. Like, you don't take a bunch of psychically gifted people into a house that is said to feed off psychic phenomenon. So, of course, they all go into the house for a weekend. And as is always the case in these movies, they start dropping one by one. It's almost an Agatha Christie type, and then there were none. And obviously every character has a little bit of a backstory and we get to see the development. And there is a particular focus on kind of a core set of characters. So you have Joyce Reardon, who is the professor, her partner, Stephen Rimbauer, who is the last of the Rimbauers who own the Rose Red house. And he's obviously renting it. And then the other main focus is this young telekinetic girl called Annie, who is very obviously based on Carrie White. She definitely has some callbacks to Carrie, and she is a young autistic girl who is the strongest psychic they have going into the house. And so she becomes very linked to the house while they're in there, and we get to see the effect that it has on her. There's also another cast of some entertaining characters, some annoying characters, some not so great characters. There's a bit of a mixed bag in here. And it was originally a 3-part series filmed back when we didn't have streaming. So it was filmed for TV. And I'm pretty sure it was aired over 3 consecutive nights in America when it was aired. So I love this film. If anyone's watched our top 25 horror films, this is actually my number 2 favorite movie. It's a big comfort movie of mine. It's very early 2000s, so we'll definitely be getting into some of the cheese and some of the stuff that comes about from movies from this era. But this was Keith's first time watching. So I'm very, very curious. And now I'm going to turn over and ask Keith, what was your impression of Rose Red?
4 hours today, so I broke it up into sort of sittings in a way. So nearly the first 2 hours, and then I finished it off sort of tonight. And it's always interesting watching it in some ways as a 4-hour movie rather than broken up for TV, because it definitely gives you a different experience of it, and it would be interesting to see it like split up overnight, in different parts, to see what difference that would make. So, I mean, overall, I'm not a fan of it, but there are bits of it I did like, but it's just this weird thing where, like, roughly the first hour of the film, I thought was pretty bad. I thought at times outright bad. Got into the house, like that bit of the film, I actually thought it got better and it settled down a bit, and I liked the look of the house, and I thought the house and the mood around the house was reasonably, suspenseful, or had a bit of like an atmosphere to it, and the house looked good. I think they did a good job like designing the house for the film and stuff. But it was sort of weird because it settled down a bit in that part, and there was still like stuff, like certain character stuff or stuff that sort of bothered me, but it definitely had settled down more. And then it got really silly again. It got really like there's just a chaotic section. I would say I think it's like in the second hour up to about when you get to the 3 hour part. I mean, there's a really, really silly section where people are just running about, where every member of the cast seems to be running about frantically and shouting. You've got the stuff in the courtyard with like the professor and with, I think it's Emery's mother. That
Yes.
stuff gets just ridiculous.
Yeah, we can talk a bit about that later because there is a reason for why that's so crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
End of the movie, weirdly, I kind of enjoyed just because it was like really like over the top silly, but actually in quite an entertaining way. I thought
Mm.
like because when she basically had a downfall, the Nancy Travis character, or Nancy Travis, I'll say the actress, was really hamming it up, and I actually
Yeah,
quite enjoyed that. You know,
me
that
too.
moment of her hamming it up, and
Yeah.
like it's almost like at that point that the character became a pantomime villain, and it was
Mm.
finally her sort of downfall. And yeah, Nancy Travis, because I've seen her in a few things, but she does actually play, quite, villainous quite well in this.
Yes, she does. Mm.
Because at the start of it, I was assuming she was going to be a sympathetic character, and I
Mm.
kept expecting that to come, and it never really did. So it's not great. It sort of has its moments. Bad stuff outweighs the good stuff, sadly, and getting on board with them because, as I said, I mean, in the end, I suppose maybe she was meant to be a villain, and that's the point. But because I noticed the X-Files reference with her when she was doing her like seminar, and the truth is out there, and they purposely quoted that. But it was sort of funny because I'm sort of assuming in this sort of story this character has to be sympathetic and kind of seen as you're rooting for her to get this thing going and to sort of like get to the meat of it. But she she never was. I found her quite objectionable from the beginning. She came across as very arrogant. Now, because of where the story goes, I'll give it a bit of a pass because ultimately I think she was meant to be a villain. Like,
I think she is. I think
it,
she's meant to be seen as being not quite all there, like from the beginning.
sure.
There are little hints about like her control issues, her kind of extreme like wanting to prove that this is out there. You see with her relationship with Steve that it's definitely not an equal relationship, things like that. So I think you are supposed to see those little hints so that when she does go full blown nuts at the end, it doesn't kind of
Mm.
completely come out of left field. Mm.
Because, yeah, I think she's meant to be seen as quite manipulative of when she's
Yes.
trying to persuade Annie and
Annie, yes.
the Menely
Rachel.
Linsky, Rachel, her
Yeah.
character, into be on her side and sort of be like, well, like screw the university and screw
Yeah.
the other, the David Duke's character, for example, is
Mm.
the one putting up the hurdles and trying to get us sort of struck off and that. But
Yeah.
it's one of those where, like, because of that, I found it quite hard to get into what the film was setting up. And
Mm.
now I think there's too many characters. Like, you don't really need that many characters. Like, because in a way, I don't know. Obviously, they were going for the thing of they all have like different powers, different
Yeah.
abilities, but yeah, you really don't need that many characters. It kept surviving, and I think from a horror standpoint, you wanted some of uh, some of them bumped off. Maybe
Some more depth.
I I mean I don't know how that slimy shit Emily survived.
Emery.
I couldn't believe it
Oh,
because
Emery.
when the suit of armor was trying to stab him, I thought
Mm.
he's definitely a goner now. This is going to be his sort of end. But yeah, like the characters weren't great. So I just mentioned Emery there. He's like a terrible character, and I think the problem with his character is, first of all, they do this sort of gimmick where he's fat basically, where he can't stop
Yeah,
eating.
I don't love that. That's definitely dated and needs to like go away.
Very
Yeah.
dated. I mean, it's also a bit laughable because when you look at him, he's not that fat at
No,
all.
he's really not. He's
So I don't
not at
know
all.
what they're measuring that at, but
Mm,
no, it was a silly, over the top, dated sort of gimmick. And the other thing with him is he was just so annoying, and I think they were trying to make him a comic relief character, but because I didn't really find the jokes with him funny, but at the same time, because he was the one constantly saying inappropriate things and being really
mm.
crude, it was hard to really laugh at him anyway. So, like, hands down, I think he's the worst character of the whole thing, and
Mm.
I did want him to die, and like when he actually ends up being quite nice at the end, I didn't really buy it because like from what we've seen of him in the film, yeah, I didn't really buy that. His mother was terrible.
Oh yeah, Emery's mother is the worst, and that whole part where she's just running around the house screaming,
Yeah,
"Emery, Emery!" It's like, oh my
yeah,
God, woman. Now the thing with her is, she was not supposed to have that big of a role.
yeah,
Very tragically, David Dukes, who plays the Professor Carl, he actually died during
yeah,
production of this movie. Now, there was actually supposed to be a whole
mm,
story with him coming to the house, and Bollinger was supposed to, the photographer that he sends in was supposed to lure him in, and they were actually going to do a whole storyline with him that was going to take up a good majority of the third act. But then David Dukes passed away, and they
yeah.
didn't really have anything to fill it in. And that's why we get a solid 5 to 10 minutes off that chaotic kind of running around with everything. Personally, I think it would have just been better if they just cut some time off the film. But
Yeah.
given that it was done for a TV like broadcast, I don't think they had that option. I think it probably had to fit
They
within
had
a
to
certain
fill the
time.
time, sort of.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, on the fly, this was like the best they can do. And if you ever do rewatch this, if you watch that part closely, you'll see that we don't actually ever see any close-ups of the professor after that. We only really see him through the
Oh
leaves
yeah,
or through
sort
the
of.
trees
Yeah.
because yeah, they brought in a body double to just kind of round out the movie. So unfortunately, that did affect the third act of the movie, I think. And I definitely agree with you that there's definitely a part in the third act that is very chaotic and it kind of loses the audience a bit until they finally bring it back with that whole,
Yeah.
let's get Annie to channel, or rather, let's get Kathy to channel Annie so we can get out of the house. So I definitely agree with you with regards to the third act. I can get through it because I love the rest of the film so much. So for me, it doesn't really bother me when the film does dip a bit because I definitely agree that there are parts where it does dip out and you kind of lose interest and then it kind of brings you back in. But I guess because I love so much of the rest of the film, for me, it just doesn't bother me like as much. Emery, I think, is a character that you're definitely supposed to love to hate. Like you are obviously not supposed to like Emery at all.
Hmm.
And I've found over the many rewatches that I've done of this movie, I actually quite like Emery now because I think he's like the only sane man sometimes. Like a lot of his stuff he says, even though it's all horrible the way he says it, it actually makes sense, and you can actually kind of see where he's coming from. And I do feel a little sorry for him after he loses his fingers. Like, that's a bit nasty, that part. Um, but like I definitely understand, like the first time I watched this film, I was like, what is this dude? Why is he surviving? And why does he survive when a
Yeah.
character like Nick, who I love, doesn't get to survive? Like Julian Sand's character, I think, is one of the best ones in the series. And I love Nick. But Emery is like, yeah, very obviously you're supposed to hate him. And I can understand why he's just such an annoying character that you're just like, oh, just die already. Cause yeah, he definitely gets extremely
I
irritating. does two things. It either kills you and you actually see the body, or it takes you and you become part of the house.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming it took Nick because he was such a powerful psychic. So yeah,
Okay.
it was feeding off him.
This cast, because Julian Sands normally plays creepy, and
Yeah, he
I
does,
only
doesn't
see
he?
him as creepy, and
Oh,
I probably struggled a bit with that character because of that.
yeah.
And
This,
I think
yeah.
the characters are quite inconsistent because it's like, there were moments where I think we were meant to like him, and I don't know, there's just moments with characters where they'll be one thing 1 minute and then the next they'll be like doing inappropriate sort of humor, or maybe him and I don't know, him and Emery, because it's like one moment he'll be like slagging Emery off, and then
Mm.
the next they'll be like not exactly getting on, and it might be just him playing with Emery, but I mean it's sort of like, yeah, there will be moments where they seem to be getting on a bit better, sort of thing.
I
But
think with Nick, and again, this comes, I think, a bit more with rewatches, is you have to remember that he's a mind reader. So he could just be responding to whatever Emery is broadcasting. So, he usually is picking on Emery when Emery is being a dick, like when he calls
mm,
Annie retarded, or when he's complaining about like the food in the house, or he doesn't want to carry the bags. But when Emery's like more low key and his anxiety is coming out, Nick can actually feel that, obviously, then he might be feeding off that. Also, like when they're having their talk and Emery's like going on about the house, Nick is like agreeing with him, but then he says something about like, oh, and that kid, she's stupid. And Nick's just like, no, don't say that. So I think he kind of is more responding to the fact that whatever he's
mm,
picking up from Emery, that's kind of what he's reacting to.
paid $5,000 each, aren't they, for the thing?
Yeah. Hmm.
I mean, I'm not sure who's paying for that, because I mean, I'm not
Joyce,
sure.
apparently, out of her own pocket.
Well, yeah, because normally I know if you're in a prestigious uni, you can get good money, but I mean, that is a lot of money to be
It's a
given to
lot of
each
money.
of them. So
Hmm.
I don't know. And bearing in mind they were struggling to fund the project anyway, so I don't know
Mm.
where she's got that from. But yeah, it's just like if you take the money out of the picture, it's really hard to see why these characters are bothering going to this house, and I think that's partly what annoys me with Emery is like, he's there taking the money, but like he's still slagging things off. Most of them surely would have expected like supernatural stuff to go down, like, and then they just seem to be surprised when it does, or like they're just like cynical of it. I mean, one bit I thought was off with Joyce was there's a scene where, because it's when the older woman, I can't remember her name, but
Kathy?
yeah, when she's had that incident, like it's in the bit of the house where she comes across like the slave, like the ghost of the
Oh,
slave.
Zakina. Yeah.
Yes,
Mm,
Shakina. Well, and she says, the slave's been living up there all this years, or been up
mm.
there, and like Joyce has this line about, as a scientist, I just don't believe that, and it's like, what are you talking about? You believe in ghosts and the supernatural, so why wouldn't you believe in that?
I guess by
It,
that point, the house has like become so alive that now she's trying to like, minimize what's going on and be like, oh, well,
yeah.
there might be ghosts, but the actual body still up there, still alive. Nah, I can't believe that. Um, but I mean, I definitely get where you're coming from. There's definitely inconsistencies in this series. I would definitely not call it a perfect series, and I think part of my love for it does have a lot to do with nostalgia and the fact that it was one of the first horror movies I ever really saw. But I mean, there are a lot of things about this film that I do really love. I mean, I'm with you when you say the house is fantastically. I mean, I love the set that they have. So it was partially filmed at a bread and breakfast at a bed and breakfast, which I will visit one day if I ever go to America. And the rest of it was built as a soundstage. And I think
Which part of
uh,
America?
I'm not sure, but I
Uh,
do like if you look it up, like Rose Red House, it
yeah.
will tell you whereabouts it is.
Mm,
Um, but I think that they did a really because obviously the main thing is the house itself. Like the house itself is the bad guy. So you have to, like, when you're doing a haunted house, you really have to make people believe that the house is a monstrosity. And I think that this movie, with all the different sets, really does that well. You know, you really get a feel that this house is endless and vast and just goes on forever. And I think some of the rooms are really fun. Like the mirror library, I think is a really, really fun room. And I think that's a really fun concept. And I think that just the concept of a mirror, of the mirrored floor itself, is so creepy, even without all the supernatural stuff. And you know, the attic and the ghosts in the house and the solarium and just every part of the house, I think for me just works really well. I mean, you mentioned liking the set, so you enjoyed, like, did you find that that you were taken in by the vastness of the house and like the evilness of it?
Yeah, I think mostly because I think my problems are other problems, but
Mm.
no, the house looked good and the design was good and the different rooms and like I think because as I said, like you got a certain part of the film when they first got there where it was a bit more, you know, spending time with the characters, building a little bit of suspense.
Mm.
And it's actually just a shame because unfortunately a lot of the other technical features of the film weren't very good. I mean, the CGI was really bad. Obviously, it's partly this is early 2000s net, you know, because this would have been on a network because it was made for
Yeah.
TV. So it's that sort of budget. But unfortunately, that stands out. I mean, there was some, you know, like well, one example I'll pick out is the, you know, like the woman who appeared to Emery in skeleton form in the bed. Like, I mean, that,
Oh, the dead movie star. Yeah.
yeah, well, that was ridiculous. When he said, like, oh, it's Marlene Dietrich, it's like, shut up. It's like, Jesus Christ. But yeah, no, that looked really bad. Like that effect. And
That's
I mean,
hilarious because that's a practical effect. If you watch the behind the scenes, yeah, they had all these like ghost dummies and all these yeah, practical effects done up. I don't think there's actually that much CGI in it, which is interesting.
no, that yeah, but there definitely was in some of the flashbacks. They
Oh, yeah,
used
yeah,
some
yeah. Some of the
CGI,
flashbacks were pretty
and
bad.
because I mean, I'm pretty sure you know that scene with the dog with Annie in the flashback.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
when the dog flies back, that's
Oh,
definitely a
yeah, yeah,
CGI
yeah.
dog.
Well, you know,
Yeah.
you don't want to throw a real dog across the road, so yeah.
No, but I'm sure there's a way to do it. But I mean, obviously nowadays, if they use CGI for that, it would look better. You would think.
Mm.
But I mean, okay. But no, a lot of it because like the special effect makeup where like the zombies appeared or where like the ghost of the slave when she appeared,
Hmm.
the special effects makeup was terrible.
Oh, really? I actually like.
It
Oh,
just
okay. I actually
took
like
me
them.
out of it.
I don't know.
No, I
It
thought it
works
was
for me.
really bad and there was some dodgy CGI.
Mm.
Um You know what made me laugh? Just going back to like the early part of the film, it made me laugh the bit where like Joyce is given this whole history lesson, and they're all in this room, and they do the whole thing with like the reporter in the back of the room,
Mm.
and he's like, "Okay, say cheese," and he takes a photo of them, and it's like none of them noticed him in the back of the room all that time. He'd been there for ages. I mean, I would have thought Joyce would have spotted him because she's up on the thing giving the. It's like, and with that stuff, I didn't really get what they were going for because it's like, so the David Duke's character, I guess he used it so that he could get a hearing where she might be suspended,
Mm.
maybe. But then I don't know what the further plan was because he was then sending the reporter off to the house, and it's I don't know, it's kind of fuzzy logic because if the David Duke character doesn't believe in this stuff anyway, then why is he sending the guy off to their house anyway? And
Oh, to spy on them. like, because he wants pictures of them looking stupid, so to speak, as the circles picture did. So I think he says that
Oh, I guess.
they've got a committee to review her tenure, and so I'm guessing he's sending a Bollinger in there to get photos of her being stupid and spooky, so that he can then present that as further evidence for her tenure. That being said, the whole tenure argument makes no sense, because as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to tenure, it's all about the size of your class. And if you look at Joyce's class in the original, her
Yeah.
class is huge. Like, people are standing. So as long as she's bringing revenue into the university, I highly doubt they would revoke her tenure. I mean, I know we have to have some drama, and I think that David Duke's character is really in there to give Joyce an antagonist, because Joyce is our
Yeah.
antagonist. So we have to see why she's become so insane. And it's definitely supposed to be like that these people have been belittling her and putting her down, and making her life hell because she has these kind of beliefs. She goes a little extreme in trying to prove them wrong.
Uh-huh.
Like, we can calm down a bit, lady, but
Well,
yeah, I think that's what it is.
because also, I mean, it's sort of this thing of at the end of the day, she's not using the college fund, so
Mm,
like in many ways, they shouldn't really care. I mean, it
no.
should be like if she's doing this on her own time and she's not
Hmm.
obviously it comes down to reputation at the end
Yeah.
of the day, but
Reputation,
it's
public
a little bit,
perception.
yeah,
And as we do have that very little scene, which gives us a little bit of insight into Professor Miller, where he basically says to her, he's like, okay, suppose you did find proof. What would that do? All that would do is upset the balance of things. So you can tell that he's one of those people that, even though he doesn't believe in it, his disbelief in it is more out of fear of like what would happen if this stuff was real. So I think, he's kicking
mm,
against her so hard because he likes his world the way it is. It's got structure, it's got control, it doesn't have any elements that he doesn't know how to deal with. And she's trying to like uproot his belief system and show him that there is a different world, and he's definitely not keen on that. At least that's my interpretation of why they've got that little to and fro between them. And like I said, the fact that they did have a planned arc for him in the third act that we never really got to see come to fruition, I'd really like to get my hands on the original script to find out exactly what they had planned for him, because I'm guessing there was supposed to be a little bit of payoff based on the stuff we saw at the beginning. But unfortunately, David Jukes did very sadly pass away unexpectedly, and so they weren't
yeah,
able to
that
do
makes
whatever they were
sense.
planning to do, yeah, to wrap up his character. So I'm guessing, had he not passed away, we may have seen a little bit more to do with Joyce and Professor Miller, and maybe that storyline would have felt a little bit more robust and complete, as opposed to what it ends up being in the movie.
So I think it is frustrating, and then you've got, in my opinion, mostly such forgettable characters, considering overall it's a good cast. Actress playing the girl was good. I thought she was pretty natural.
Yeah, one of the
Um,
better portrayals of autism that I've seen, especially in the
yeah,
early, in the early 2000s, when this kind of stuff is not well, you know, it's not well
yeah,
portrayed. I thought Annie's portrayal was actually quite sensitive. Kimberly Brown, I mostly know her from
okay.
Halloween Town, which is
Oh, of
a,
course.
yeah.
That might be what I've seen her in as well, because I
Mm-hmm.
sort of watched that last year, so that might
Yeah.
be. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's
Mm,
probably where I know her from. Oh,
yeah.
nice. Yeah, no, I think she's pretty solid in it, quite natural, and
Mm.
yeah, Melanie Linsky's very good. Obviously, quite natural. I mean, at times could have been given more to do, but
Yeah, Rachel's a bit of a lump. She kind of
yeah,
just
yeah,
follows Annie around yelling, Annie! She doesn't really get much development until like the third act, when she finally starts to come into her own
yeah.
a little bit more. I think even Melanie Linsky commented on that, like the fact that they didn't give her character
Okay,
much to do. So yeah, she
fair.
definitely could have been built up a bit more.
So yeah, I think those two and um, Nancy Travis are the standout performances because, as I said, the cast are. I mean, as I always, I'm just going to keep calling him John Locke's dad, but I, I do like that actor. He's a good actor, so I always
Yeah.
enjoy him. But yeah, a lot of times these, I guess, I don't know about Emery Dasher now. I guess she's all right. She's solid enough. I
She's
don't know if
okay,
the
but Pam
character's
doesn't
that
make the
good.
biggest impression. No,
Uh,
Pam, I think Pam's mostly there to die early. You know, you need a character who's going to be, you know, the sacrificial lamb, so to speak. And so I think Pam, that's kind of her purpose, um, is
so
to be there. Yeah.
okay. So another sort of complaint I had, which is more in the setup of the film. This is where some scenes could be trimmed or cut, where I think
Mm,
it's a slow setup and probably it suffers a bit because they wanted to fill the time, like you said. But
mm.
the stuff where you know where she's giving the lecture, well, not the
Yeah.
lecture exactly, but the stuff where
She's given the
she's
history of the house.
yeah, like
Mm,
just doing flashbacks and her doing exposition. Yeah, I didn't really like that. I just thought like over the course of the film, those secrets and that history could naturally come out. And I think I had a bit of a problem with it where it did it both ways, where you would cut between her, but then like the reenactment of the history. And in a way, I just wanted them to do one or the other. I didn't,
mm.
I didn't want it to be like cutting between the two. It's sort of like either have like a full blown, this is in the past and show us, or just have her telling them sort of thing. Don't mix it up. And it's also that sort of scene where it shows how cheap this is because like the flashbacks like didn't look very convincing. But I don't know what you think about that. Like, because obviously it continued in the house, but for some reason I didn't mind it as much in the house. I'm not sure why.
Mm.
It's just felt like maybe it's just because that was the setup and it stood out as this is the setup, and I just want them to get on and get to the house sort of thing. So
Yeah.
when she was doing it in the house, it probably made more sense because they were actually there and she was explaining different things.
Actually, one of my favorite scenes. I love the college lecture hall scene because I love getting all the background about Rose Red, and I think that the movie does it that way so that when we get to the house, we can just go straight into the house, you know, and just start exploring.
Yeah.
I thought that doing it, you know, as a college, like as a lecture with the people that she's taking into the house, like kind of as an orientation. I actually thought that was an okay way to info dump. I mean, obviously there are better ways out there to get your
Mm.
exposition across, but I thought, you know, Joyce is a college teacher. This is kind of what she would do. You know, she would get up and give an overview. This is what she's used to. And I think it just has a good, I don't know. I love the flashbacks. I know they're cheesy. I know some of the CGI is really bad. I was rewatching it just the other day, and that scene with a guy who gets decapitated by the falling glass, that was a bad bit of CGI. Or the
Yeah.
guy who falls from the roof. But I really love the story of the Rimbauers, particularly Ellen. I've read, like, they actually published her diary, so to speak. And I've read that,
Okay.
and so that was fun. So I actually really like the flashbacks, and I like the flashbacks when we go into the house. They're just a natural continuation of what we already know. I mean, I do understand what you're saying in that, like, we just want to get to the house and we want to start seeing things, and it might have been better if it was mixed in. But I think they did it that way so that we had all the information. And so and also, you know, because we had a few little bits and pieces, like you had the photographer Bollinger go there first, and Zucchina answers the door. So because we already have the information, we know that this is something sinister, so it adds that bit of like, oh my god, like something bad is really going on here. So yeah, it's funny that you didn't like that scene because I actually really love that scene. Like a lot of the time when I watch the movie, I'll skip like certain scenes just to get to there because I just love the history of the house.
A lot of the dialogue was really bad. So
Well, it's early 2000s,
I know.
and Stephen King mostly writes for books, so writing for the screen doesn't always
Yeah, he
translate as
actually.
well. But
Oh,
I
and
definitely
he
understand where you're
can't
coming
act,
from.
by the way, as
No,
was
he can't,
proven.
but I
He
still love
really
his
can't.
cameo. I still love
Yeah.
his cameo.
Yeah.
And I know that you don't like Emery's humor, but I really love the line where he's all like, oh, is it haunted? And Emery's like, yeah, by the ghost of the pizza delivery guy who asked too many questions.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, that was
I
good.
thought
Well,
that was
that's probably one of the rare times where they got a good comedic line from memory, but
Yeah.
it was, you know, it's one of these things. It's sort of a tradition now ever since Hitchcock, you know,
Yeah.
to have like the creator get a
Yeah.
camera. So I'm fine
And
with it. It's not a big
yeah.
deal, but yeah, he
Oh no,
really.
he's definitely not an actor. He as far as acting goes, he's a fantastic writer. You know, like stick to what you know, dude. But I do like the little cameo from him. Like I think it's nice, you know, that they give him this little cameo in his own movie, and it's just a bit of fun. So
Also,
yeah.
also, I do have a question about that and
Mm,
about the house because why is it still open to the public?
I
Like, didn't
know,
they
right?
shut it down or so? And
Well, I
like
guess because Rimbauer himself is
pizzas
in the
being
house,
delivered.
so
Yeah,
yeah. Plus, they
I
do say that it's
guess
in the middle of Seattle, so it's not really a hard place to
uh,
find, is it?
like Annie kind
Oh
of
yeah, that
reacting.
scene's not great, is it?
Yeah, well, it's the mother's dialogue. It's like there's something wrong with that little girl, and I don't
Don't
mean
just
just
mean that
like
she's autistic. Oh my God, I wanted to
autistic.
smack someone for
And
that
then she
line.
kept saying the same, like something wrong with that girl,
Hmm.
and it's like, oh, the dog knows, the dog can sense these things. So yeah, that was really bad. And as I said, that scene has some bad CGI with like the boulders coming through, and there's like a bad line later on from partner. Then she needs Annie,
Yeah,
and she's saying the others are good, but they're just like candles. Annie
candles.
is like a searchlight. She can wake up Rose Red. I need Annie. That was a really cheesy line.
It
Just
was. It
getting all
was.
fancy with she's a searchlight.
Yeah. That being said, there is an exchange in that scene that I do love. Just the way that Steve says the line. They're talking about the house, and Joyce is like, "How can you hate it so much?" And he's like, "It eats my relatives." Did you miss that in your research? I always love that because I'm kind of on board with him. Like, which is like, how can you hate it? It's like, dude, it ate my whole family. Of course I hate this house. Like, I'm with Steve.
And Steve, it is Steve, isn't it?
Yep.
How he's with he's with the
Rachel?
men. Yeah, yeah, and it's
Well,
all
it's kind of
funny.
implied. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure they kiss, don't they? Or it's definitely implied that they're
No
together.
kiss, but it is implied that
Uh,
they're together.
and that seems pretty fast because he was in a relationship with Joyce.
Yeah,
Not
but they do make it very clear that that relationship is not an equal
okay.
relationship. And I mean, he even says, like in the beginning, he's like listing all those random questions, and he's just like, if I didn't own Rose Red, would I still be in your bed right now? Like it
Uh,
is very much implied that, you know, that it's not an equal relationship. And you know, you can see Joyce slowly becoming crazy. So I think it's supposed to be like as Joyce disintegrates, Steve starts to realize, ooh, I'm sleeping with the crazy lady. Like maybe we should rectify
and
this.
to be fair, I think the end bit is like 3 months later,
Yes,
so
it's a
you
few
can
months after the
probably buy.
fact.
Then they would. Oh, yeah, that reminds me actually. Another like bad sort of dialogue was, you know, the father of like Annie and
Oh yeah, yeah.
Rachel.
Rachel,
His
yeah, Annie and
stuff
Rachel's dad.
about like where he just kept calling Joyce the crazy lady or something,
Oh yeah,
and
crazy
it
lady
was
number
so
one and crazy lady number two. Hey, crazy lady,
cartoony.
how you
Yeah,
doing? It was, wasn't it?
and I think that's part of the problem with the characters and the way they talk is they're very cartoonish and they're
Mm.
very one note. Because like I sort of thought that about Emery's mother, like she is in a
Oh,
way
she's
a walking
completely one
cartoon.
note. Yeah, she is. I think she is the worst character in this movie, and I honestly wish that they'd done a little bit more with her because
Yeah.
she was just. I was so glad when she died. Oh God, that incessant Emery, Emery at the end of the movie. It's like, woman, shut up. Just
But yeah, I mean, Annie's mother, I thought was not mother, father. I thought he was just pretty. It was just pretty bland, and I mean, even as someone like, okay, he's a bit of a douche, and he's not. It just didn't really feel like a real person talking. You know, it just felt a bit
I
basic.
definitely get
And
where you're coming from. Like they
but
definitely make him very villainous and cartoonish, like, yes, this is the evil patriarch who doesn't understand his daughter and is scared of his daughter. That being said, I do like the scene that he and Rachel have after Annie has wrecked the house and they're looking at photos, and Rachel's like, Dad, whatever Annie is, it's not anyone's fault. And he
Yeah.
actually seems to show like a little bit of concern. Like, I like I've said right at the beginning of the video, I do love that line where he's all like taking Annie into a genuinely haunted house that's like trying to check your gas tank with a lighter. Like
Yeah.
it shows that there is a little bit more to him, but I definitely agree that they could have made him less cartoonish and less kind of one note, because he really just seems to be there just for Rachel and Annie to kick against without any kind of further development to his character.
Some of like the themes of the film, like, because obviously my thing overall with it is I can see a good story in there, and maybe if I read the book, I would like it, but it's just obviously these things are always about execution, and unfortunately a lot of this is executed badly, but the actual themes that are in there, because obviously they set up these themes early on about like sexism in a way. They mention that there's far more female victims than male victims, and they sort of link it to the history of the house, also to do with racism, about the way
Yes, definitely with
like
Zucchina.
it is treated as a
Yeah.
result. I mean, obviously you get that flashback where she kind of has a thing with the husband, and yeah, she's sort of like sneered because of it, but
Family trauma and intergenerational trauma. Obviously we
mm,
see with Annie and her parents, and obviously Steve with his history, and Emery with his mother. So I think there is a lot of like learning to break free. And the big theme is Steve learning to like break the generational trauma that this house has produced over all these years. And of course, the big final like thing is him taking the hammer and saying no, and like smashing Ellen's ghost with the hammer, because she's been trying to get him for years and years. And then obviously Annie breaks free of her like family, and learns how to have a bit more control over her powers, and destroys the house, and Rachel coming into her
okay.
own. And I think there are quite a few things in there. Again, I do think they do get a bit lost in all of the
Yeah.
supernatural crap that's going on. I think this movie is more about like the supernatural happenings than about any kind of deep like theme or anything to be expunged. I do like that, in the flashbacks, Ellen's story is very sad, and we obviously see the sexism and patriarchy and misogyny within her marriage. She gets a venereal disease in Africa that was given to her by her husband, who obviously caught it from someone that he'd slept with. We see that he has like all these affairs, to the point that she's able to get Zucchina to seduce him so that they can kill him. And then Ellen's rage and female rage, again, we're coming back to female rage, kind of filling the house, and her
Yeah.
spirit kind of imbuing the house. Like I know it's a cheesy scene, but I actually really like the scene with the seance where the psychic tells her that one line, the house isn't done until you say it's done.
Mm.
Until you say. And then we learned that Ellen never said that the house was done, which is why it continues to grow, and why her rage continues to fill the house and make it the monstrosity that it is. I mean, they even point out that the house has actually grown since it was built. They remember Joyce shows in the picture, this is what it looked like when it was first built.
Yeah.
This is what it looks like now. And it's so much bigger. So I do think there are some themes in there, but they're obviously buried a bit beneath the spectacle, so to speak. So
Yeah, I mean that's fair. Like that's sort of what I was thinking. And there are a lot of good themes in this and a lot of good ideas, but unfortunately they're not really brought to the front enough and not executed enough.
did anything work for you? Were there any scenes that were effective? Do you have any, like, I'm just trying to see if we can end this on a positive note.
Uh-huh. Well, obviously, as I said, some of the performances, unfortunately, a lot of times this comes down to what the characters are given, and I think these are mostly forgettable characters, apart from a couple. As I said, I enjoyed Nancy Travis playing a villain. I thought she was a good villain.
Yeah.
And, So she was good, and obviously a couple of the other performances I liked as well. And as I said, when it went kind of crazy B movie at the end, I actually enjoyed it. But it's sort of like, yeah, this felt a bit like a different movie. But I appreciated that. I really enjoyed, the armor coming alive and
Yes.
trying to stab Emery. That was really good. That was
Yeah.
good stuff. It's just a shame it didn't
It
succeed.
didn't didn't
Yeah,
succeed.
yeah, yeah. But that was something. Yeah, no, there were moments in it which I quite liked. I quite liked Pam in the lake. That was
Yes, that
quite
was an
eerie.
effective.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Mm.
So that wasn't bad.
Did you like the statue? I always liked the statue taking its face off because I thought that was one bit of particularly good effects that they did, and I always found that very creepy.
I I didn't really like the effects of that.
Oh.
I thought the effects were badly done, but it was once again it's a scene where in theory it's quite good, but probably taken out of it a bit by the effects. I rewatched it again. I might actually watch it as like a
As three
TV.
separate parts?
Yes,
Yeah.
see what happens, but
Mm.
because obviously that affects you as well
Yes.
because I wasn't into it at the beginning almost, then it started off on a bad foot. And
Mm.
then, unfortunately, I think there's large spells of it where it does drag. This position, this place where I thought, well, okay, this is looking up, and then this
Mm.
actually isn't going to be this bad after all. And then it just got really silly again, and not really in a good sort of way. But it at least ended quite well. The ending was like pretty
Yeah,
good.
the ending's strong. I like the
Yeah, the
ending.
ending's quite strong.
The rain of rocks and boulders is actually a reference to Carrie, the book. In the book,
Okay.
there is an incident where very young Carrie sees her neighbor in a bikini and is so scandalized and so shocked by the sight that she
All
makes
right.
stones, yeah, rain from the sky. And like I said, Annie is obviously based
Mm,
on Carrie, with the telekinesis and the outsider status and stuff like that. So yeah, so I did find that interesting. So I guess at the end of the
cool.
day, yeah, I mean, I'm guessing you're not going to rank this very high, but what would you give this out of 10 after a first viewing?
I'll give it 4.
Oh my God, I thought at least it would get a 5.
It
Oh, that's
it
terrible.
it almost did because, like as I said, when it got into the second hour and it sort of steadied down a bit, and I
Mm,
thought this is actually on track to being better, like being at least decent. Because I thought
mm,
once they got into a groove and they were in the house, I thought, yeah, if they keep this up, this is going to be at least half decent. Because it was like some of the characters were still bothering me, and there was still like silly shit thrown in, like the stuff with the dolls I thought was silly, but it was but then unfortunately it got really bad again, and you sort of had, I mean, in a way there's sort of 4 sections. Like there's
mm.
the beginning, which I thought was a little bit of a slog and I wasn't into. There's the first bit where they're first in the house, which is probably the strongest part of the film, and then there's the silly shit with like the Duke's character
Yeah.
and the mother running about, and then it kind of has like an enjoyable B movie style ending, and then as I said, the very ending. But it's so yeah. See, at one point I thought I'm gonna at least give this maybe roughly about a 5, but then it sort of nosedive again, and although I quite like the mood of it at times, and as I said, the house, it's not particularly scary. It's just that it has a certain sort of mood to it. But
Did you like the
like
score? Because I
yeah,
really love the score
I
for this
think
movie.
so.
I
Yeah,
think the
yeah.
theme is
The
really
music
eerie.
was
Mm,
yeah. The music was okay because you grew up on it and you have such nostalgia for it. It's gonna be hard for me to like really watch it now and appreciate it. Where all the rough, like early 2000s,
Mm.
this was on a network TV, that's going to stand out. Whereas obviously, if I grew up on it and if I liked it at the time,
Mm.
I might give it more of a pass now. But because I never had that experience, then
Yeah.
that other stuff is always going to stand out more for me.
Yeah,
So,
fair enough. No, I understand. I mean, if I was rating this just on the merits of the actual production and the script and what it actually was, I'd probably like rate it maybe a 6 or a 7, because even I can like understand that it's definitely got some pacing issues. Obviously, like we've said, the death of David Duke's definitely messed up like the
mm,
tail end of the movie. And even when I watch it, there are parts that I skip. I will skip and watch like my absolute favorite parts, and then I might mess around and watch other things. On an entertainment note, I'd give it 10 out of 10 because I love watching it so much. But I
okay.
do get that, like, if I'm trying to look at it objectively as like, is this a good film? Is this a good production? Yeah, I'd probably go about a 7. I do think that some of the effects are better than you seem to think, but again, it might just be because I saw this in 2000, so I still have that 2000 kind of mentality of like the effects actually looked okay back then.
Yeah.
I have always loved the concept of Rose Red herself, because I love the idea of like a sentient house actually
Mm,
being evil. Like haunted houses, they're haunted. There are spirits in there, and the spirits are what get you, and the spirits are what, are to be afraid of. But I always love with Rose Red that no, it is the actual literal house. It is imbued with the spirit of Ellen Rimbauer. Like Joyce said, she built it to break hearts the way that hers was broken. So I love this idea of this house that can actually eat you. And I think that the film does,
mm.
like I said, a really good job of showing the vastness of the house and the expanse of the house and just everything that goes on in there. And I do think for me, there are some scenes that are quite eerie and quite effective. The Pam
Yeah.
scene is definitely one of them. The mirror library, like I mentioned, the part where the statue takes its face off. There's also one bit that I find really eerie just because of the character that it affects. And that is, so Annie is non-verbal for the majority of the movie, and when she does speak, she speaks in a very clipped, very off kind of manner, which shows that she's not used to communicating verbally. But there is a moment when she's taken over by Ellen Rimbauer, and she turns to them and she says in Ellen Rimbauer's voice, she's like, "We're so happy to have you at Rose Red today. I do hope you'll enjoy your stay." And just seeing this girl who has
Oh
been
yeah,
so
yeah.
non-verbal and so, shy and quiet, just suddenly channel this like really eerie spirit. It's really uncanny. At least I found it really unsettling. And yeah, so I do agree that there's definitely pacing problems and some cheesiness, but nostalgia and the fact that this movie is like right up my alley, the haunted house, supernatural type stuff. I actually really like the character of Annie. I love the character of Nick. Joyce is a fantastic, fun character to watch kind of just devolve. And I
Yeah.
think Nancy Travis really is the strongest performance in the movie. Like she's really having
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of fun at the end of the movie, hamming it up and being all like, "I'm not crazy, I'm staying here, blah, blah, blah." And then when you
Yeah.
see at the
Yeah,
end
I
that she's
enjoyed that. Yeah.
also, this movie made it so I cannot listen to Theme from a Summer Palace without feeling severely creeped out. Every
Oh,
time I
okay.
hear the theme from a Summer Palace, I'm just like, no. It's kind of the way Halloween
Is
makes you not want to
that
listen to.
like classical bit
That's
of
the
music yeah, yeah, that one.
yes. So yeah, so every
It's
time
the
I
one
hear
they
that,
used in that Buffy episode, isn't it? Like
oh
the
yes, in him.
season
Yes,
7.
they
Yeah,
use it in him.
yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I
There's
keep
also a
thinking of that.
Simpsons episode where
Oh,
Homer's
okay.
group are auditioning a bunch of people to be like the fourth member, and one of the old guys from the nursing home gets up and sings it, but he literally just sings "Theme from a Summer
Okay.
Place." Yeah,
That's pretty
he
good.
just gets up there. So yeah, so the movie has forever ruined that song for me, but it's just I think it's a comfort to me, this movie, which sounds really weird because it's it's a creepy movie, but it's one of those ones that I throw on really often when I just want to feel like relaxed and feel nostalgic and just kind of enjoy a good old fashioned haunting. When I was rewatching it, I was watching it the other day, and I'm like, I have a feeling Keith is probably not going to like this. I think some of these effects are going to bother him a bit, and yeah, so I did have a feeling that you wouldn't fall in love with it the way that I do. But I am very glad that you have watched it now, and maybe down the track you'll rewatch it and maybe view it in a more favorable light. We'll see what happens.
Thoughts on Rose Red, the miniseries, technically a film, a 4 hour
Yes.
film. You can find it on YouTube for free. It's the good thing is on YouTube you've either got the whole 4 hours in one, or I think it is split up in parts as well, so you
Oh,
can
nice. So you
yeah,
can
you
watch it
can
either way.
choose, how you want to watch it. But it is on YouTube if you've never
Mm.
seen it. And maybe for horror fans like us, it is one to tick off, regardless of how you feel about it. But that's Rose Red. And I think we'll definitely do more stuff that's similar to this, maybe mini-series style things. Let us know your thoughts. I know Alison will be sharper in the knives in the comments because she probably dislikes this more than I do. But anyway, let us know your thoughts if you've seen this. Like and subscribe, share us out. Rachel, if you want to promote your channel.
Guys, come follow me, Rachel McDonald, video essays discussing movies and TV shows. My Tumblr and Twitter are also linked on my YouTube, and Keith usually puts a link in the description. He might not today because we disagreed. It really depends on where we are on the disagreement level, but he usually is nice enough to do that, so come follow me everywhere.
Okay, and we're going to be here all month doing special horror reviews all month. And there's also a top 10 list, which may already be up when this goes up. So look out for that. That's top 10 Halloween themed TV episodes. So look out for more from us all October. We'll see you guys later.